Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're watching from. Welcome to this edition of the Scott Ritter Show. Um, the last couple weeks, I think headlines have been dominated by uh, reports regarding intelligence leaks, documents that have been put on the internet, displayed on Twitter, Telegram, 4chan, other channels that purport to show some of the most sensitive secrets of the United States when it comes to issues like Ukraine, uh, U.S.-Chinese relations, etc. There has been an individual who has been apprehended by the FBI, brought into custody, accused of being the perpetrator of these leaks. But there's just a lot of questions out there about how did this individual gain access to these documents? Are these documents, in fact, for real? Is the information in the documents doctored? Is this a larger disinformation campaign? Questions that get into issues like national security, intelligence, and such. So there could be a better guest than the one we're going to have today. A very experienced intelligence official from the United States, Larry Johnson. I also call him a friend and a colleague. Larry is somebody that has worked in the CIA. He's worked with in the counterintelligence, the intelligence field, with the State Department, and he's somebody who has been outspoken on this issue. Thank you very much, Larry, for coming. If there's anything about your bio that you want to correct, feel free to do so at this time.
I just want to express a disclaimer up front. Scott took me to play golf at the Army-Navy Club and didn't beat me too badly. So
I
harbor no ill will.
But no, thank you, Larry, for coming on. Look, I think we should also put another disclaimer that although we're friends and we're colleagues, we oftentimes have disagreements on issues.
Sure.
But that's a good thing, because I think some of the times when you have issues of this complexity, the notion that we, people like you and I, are going to spoon feed an audience answers is right. Absurd. I think sometimes the best thing that can happen is that we have a discussion and let the audience see things. Now, I'm not saying that we're in disagreement here. I'm just saying that there are times when dogs decide to bark in the middle of a program, and the mailman just decided to come to my door, but I'm going to ignore him for a moment. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Larry, is I'm going to turn it over to you while I mute the microphone, and maybe you can give your perception of what's going on with the leaker, and are these documents genuine, and and things like that.
Sure. So just to put this in context so that your listeners understand why I deigned to opine on this. I spent 4 years with the Central Intelligence Agency as an analyst, but also worked part-time in the Directorate of Operations. I also happened to work in the Operations Center, where one of the documents that was leaked was prepared. Up until about an hour and a half ago, I was convinced that there was no way this kid could have had access to that CIA Operations Center report. I have now had a friend who's still involved in the community, without specifying which agency, has reached out to me and says, man, he said, I agree with you. There's something not right about all of this. This stinks. It doesn't make sense. But he said, the CIA has deployed so many operations officers out in these military commands that they have made JWICs available to them. And JWICs is the top secret side of the computer world within the intelligence community. So that document was actually available on the server at the Air National Guard unit up in Massachusetts. But it begs the question, why in the world would someone who's described as a technician be reading that kind of document or even know where to look for it? That's number one. But over the course of 23 years after I left the State Department's Office of Counterterrorism in '93, I provided consulting services. I was a State Department subject matter expert for a team that supported JSOC, SOCOM, Special Operations. We scripted terrorism exercises. I was involved with the scripting of over 253 both exercises, and execution, scripting and executing those. So I had extensive experience sitting inside SCIFs all around the world. I was at Fort Bragg, I was at Southcom down in Miami, I was at Northcom out in Colorado, Stuttgart, I was at both AFRICOM and UCOM, CENTCOM, SOCOM are both at MacDill. So, I was in all of them. And in my experience, I never saw any E3s running around. Uh, One of my friends who is familiar with the Air Force now, a more recent vintage, has confirmed. He says it's crazy, but he says the Air Force has been hiring these youngsters, 19, 20, 21, and giving them these extraordinary clearances. He says, so that's not wrong. That's not wrong. But he says the issues that are wrong is that the documents that were available that could have been taken, that should have been taken, weren't. I find that fascinating, as well as pointing out that all of this, the story originated with Bellingcat. And Bellingcat, as you know, Scott, is an MI6 front that's received money from the CIA. Bellingcat was notorious back during the so-called sarin gas attacks in Syria that were ostensibly carried out by the Syrian government, when in fact they were carried out by the rebels that were being funded by the Brits. It was a staged incident. And Bellingcat was in the lead in trying to sell the lie in that story. So their mere presence in this story, coupled with the fact that one of their former colleagues is now a reporter for the New York Times, just puts red flags up all over. So it is the other issue that I still haven't resolved is this kid is part of the National Guard. They're not a fully activated unit, is my understanding, which means they do 1 month, drills 1 weekend a month. Well, which weekend is it? Was it the weekend of March 4th, March 5th? That means, because these documents were posted on March 4th, that means that kid had to get in there, come to drill, and he's not working unsupervised. I mean, you've been involved with this long enough that you don't let some E3 just come in and say, "Oh, I'm going to determine what I'm going to do for the day." They have a chain of command. They have non-commissioned officers. They have lowly lieutenants up to lieutenant colonels and colonels parading about. And particularly if you're in a SCIF, you don't just get to decide on your own, well, what am I going to do today? I'm just going to surf the web or, whatever. So just a lot of it doesn't make sense. I think I have no doubt that the documents are genuine. I have no doubt that the documents are primarily devoted to Ukraine and Russia and paint a very different picture from what has been presented to the American people by General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense. So when you combine those two facts together, I don't think the kid was doing this on his own. I think he was used. I don't know how he was used, but I don't think this is just a one-off and a serendipitous event.
Well, thank you, Fred. Just because we're speaking to an audience that may not understand some of the terminology used.
Sure.
Real quick, what's a SCIF?
Yeah, so SCIF stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, spelled SCIF, but pronounced like SKIFF. And when you go into an operations center, I put a picture up on my site at sonar21.com about last week about the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center that was up in Al Udeid, posted right on the CENTCOM's website. I mean, it's not like I was posting secret information. This stuff's all public. So in these operations center, it brings people together from different organizations within a particular military branch, such as the Air Force, as well as potentially if it's joint, which means you've got people from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and from other government agencies such as State Department or CIA or National Security Administration. But the SCIF is set apart from that area, and the SCIF is designed to provide access for top secret information, top secret only. and you have to get into the room. Only American citizens are allowed in that room. Only people with top secret clearances. The likelihood that you could easily just print off papers and walk them out, not easily done. There are printers there, but they do have lots of information that they identify what people are doing, why they're doing it. And so you can, if you were just doing random searches, the way that the tickets, the access to that computer exists, it's going to send off red flags. Someone's going to say, well, why are you doing this? What are you looking for? Do you have a need to know?
Now, I'm going to bounce something off you and just get your opinion. I used to be involved in marine. Well, look, I look at your beard, Larry, and I see you got some gray in there. So you're of a certain age. Okay, and I would imagine that your resume dates back to the times that I was actively involved. And to give you an example, I think there was a time when, I know when I came in the 1980s, that top secret code word clearances were very rare. And only people that had an absolute need to know were given them. And to gain access to a skiff or a place where this stuff was stored, it wasn't just that you had the clearances, but you had to have a need to know, which generally meant that you were trained in the material that you were going to gain access to, and that training comes with schooling, experience, etc. So right off the bat, the idea of a E3, that's a low-grade enlisted personnel, working out of a Air National Guard facility in Massachusetts, gaining access to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff sensitive briefing documents seems ludicrous. And it would have been ludicrous back in the day because those documents never left the Pentagon. They never left the Sensitive Joint Operations Center. That was a contained area. But now as you mentioned today, we talk about connectivity. And I experienced this in the Marine Corps. We had a photo interpretation unit, a reserve unit, and you asked the question, which weekend does this reservist drill? But in the post-Cold War era, we started farming out because we consolidated the intelligence community. We got rid of the real experts. We retired all of the real experts, and then we stood up these reserve units so that they were drilling constantly. And we would rotate in different crews, and they would receive tasking from national resources. So even though this reserve unit was in Aurora, Colorado, it would receive tasking from NPIC in Washington, D.C., and so the tasking would come in over the computer. These guys from Colorado would be looking at things of a national level, annotating them, printing them out, doing workups on it, putting them back together, then sending it back. And I would postulate that could be what was going on here in Massachusetts, that this Air Force Reserve Intelligence Unit was being tasked as part of the Reserve National Tasking to help the J2 of the Joint Chiefs put together briefing documents, etc. This kid would have been able to gain access to this information in that matter. Is this crazy, or is this something that would make sense from your point?
No. I think it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, focus on the identity of this unit, the 16th Air Force, and then I think he was the 102nd Intelligence Organization within that Air Force unit. What do they focus on? Information warfare, cyber warfare. Well, again, I don't think that's just a coincidence, because maybe it's because of the nature of their focus that the access to those kinds of documents existed, and also the opportunity, if you will, from a CIA officer working around those individuals to do some spotting and assessment of, who's the kind of person we could potentially use, and how could this information be leaked. But no, it definitely, what you posit, sure.
Now here's something else to chew on. just because, and I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical and tell me if you agree with me. Just because you have a document that's top secret with all the fancy code words up there, does that mean that the information contained in it, even if it wasn't manipulated, it was the honest information actually put it, does that mean that information is 100% accurate?
No. In fact, I've seen as you have seen, lots of times that material gets put into a document, and it's complete garbage. I remember when I was a Honduran analyst, there was a DIA unit that had the name 7 Gamblers, and boy, they were bad gamblers. I'll tell you that, because what the information they put out was just junk, and yet I had a branch chief. When she came up, boy, she took what they were providing as if it was gold from God. And I had said, no, look, and they go in and try to explain it. So, yeah, that's an error that particularly people that have not worked in the intelligence community make the mistake and assumption that just because it has that code word, and these things, some of these things have some remarkable code words. When I saw SI, TK, Gamma, Orcon, I'm going, holy smokes.
I can't even say that, Larry.
No, I'm sorry. Well, I'm just reporting what's on the news, as they say.
I know.
And it's just, so, and then there was one of the documents, I think it was also the CIA Ops Center document, had the word FISA, which right away you're going, holy smokes, now we're into DOJ territory. Yeah. So it is just, it underscores part of the problem is the classifications oftentimes are used to hide information away from the public that would be embarrassing to the government if that information got out. It's not actually protecting a particular source or method of collecting that intelligence. And so I think there needs to be that distinction. But oftentimes the classifications are used as a stick to beat people with, just to keep them in the dark, while foreign adversaries or so-called adversaries who have intelligence services like Russia, like the Chinese, like the French, the Israeli, they're able to actually have a far better grasp of what the United States is doing. So, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make that point because one of the things that frustrated me in this whole leak experience is how our media would take a document and then take that information and run with it as if it were the word of God, as if the burning bush had been lit, and therefore everything in this document is true, and therefore the public must understand that this is the gospel according to the CIA. But the fact of the matter is, and again, I'd like your insight. I'll give a quick experience from mine. James Clapper, former CIA director, used to be the head of the imagery. I mean, they change their names so often, but what used to be NEMA became something else. But he is acknowledged in his book and afterwards that his organization was tasked with, it's an imagery analysis organization, so they look at imagery from national technical means, and basically they were told to find proof of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And so he said that he ordered his analysts to find weapons of mass destruction capability looking at imagery when no such capability existed, and then they produced reports that ended up in the briefing documents for the President of the United States, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, etc. And I bring this up because I'll give you an example. People point to the casualty figures that were contained in one of the briefing documents. And a lot of people assume that those casualty figures had to be based upon really good intelligence. And my position is that because the political sensitivity of those casualty figures is so high, that even within a document prepared for the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, people will be told to lie, to put in numbers that aren't true, to shape the data for political purposes. and that sometimes the intelligence community is in the business of deceiving people on purpose, and that's why you can't believe the numbers. Am I off base on this, or is there justification?
Oh, no, heavens no. In fact, people need to understand these documents are a snapshot in time. And so particularly the documents that showed up on the internet were dated February 28th, March 1st, March 2nd. I can take you back. I think if I go back and look at sonar21.com, you'll see that I had written back around the end of February. I was in conversation with one of my friends who's still active in the intelligence side of things. And I asked him, and he was careful not to divulge any classified information. He wasn't saying, yeah, I saw this, top secret this. But he did say that the Defense Intelligence Agency was taking information directly from the Ukrainians and republishing it with respect to casualties. And they'd kept doing that until like one day, and it was around March 1st, March 2nd, they changed just overnight. They stopped reporting verbatim what the Ukrainians were giving them, and then started caveating it, said, well, we don't know. And in fact, that's reflected in one of these documents where in the bluff, the bottom line up front, at the summary paragraph at the start of some of these documents, they state very specifically that, the polite way, that they said it very diplomatically, but we think the Ukrainians are lying to us about the numbers they're given. So that, but again, you got to understand it's a snapshot in time. It's like I said last week that based upon my experience and based upon talking to another friend, a retired CIA officer who's still working in military SCIFs, that there's no way that this kid could have had access to a CIA Ops Center report. Today, I have to revise that because I've now received updated information from somebody who knows that, in fact, that document is available because the CIA personnel have been assigned to these military units, and therefore they have access. So that what I was reporting last week was accurate as far as I understood it based upon the knowledge I had, but that changes over time. Well, the same thing with these documents. Anybody that looks at them as if, oh my God, this is the final truth. Yeah, it was the truth as of February 28th, or March 1st, or March 2nd, as people understood it back then. But as you have, I always listen to your analyses on a variety of channels, and the real fundamental change that is reflected in these documents is the loss of the air defense system of Ukraine. They no longer are able to do layered air defense, which means that the Russian Air Force with fixed wing using the glide bombs has dramatically stepped up its activity, and those bombs carry far more lethality and damage-causing capability than any of the missiles that were being launched previously. So that has significantly altered what's taking place on the ground, and whatever assumptions they had on February 1st or February 28th or March 1st about an upcoming counteroffensive has had to be revised, I'm sure, in light of the Russians stepping up and using those weapon systems with more frequency and accuracy.
I think what you're saying, Larry, is that a good analyst is not a prisoner to a former piece of analysis, that a good analyst continues to update information and alter and adapt the analysis as the situation evolves. And I think some people confuse that with ignorance or a deliberate deception, and it's not the case. The fact of the matter is, right, you always have to be adapting as you go. Now, again, without we both have to be careful here because of our background, so we can't say too much. Right. But and to the audience, when I say that, please don't think that we're hiding something from you, because we're not. There's really no secret code out there. Life is pretty simple. It's just that some things you're not allowed to talk about, even though it doesn't matter. But what do you think? I've been looking at these documents, and one of the reasons why I have trouble thinking that it's a great conspiracy is that my understanding of the way the Russians work, and it's the way we work, We want our own opinion. The reason why we have a giant intelligence community is that we want to collect our own information and have our own people assess it, so that the judgments that are being drawn from this are judgments that we make based upon our needs, our wants, our desires. And we are very reluctant to allow outside information to come in and shape our decision-making process. So the idea that we are pulling off a con on the Russians by releasing this information to get the Russian intelligence services to absorb it and reevaluate things to change their direction, to me that just seems a little weak. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, people watch the spy movies, and because just the classifications on some of these documents and the information contained in them would reveal likenesses or methods for how that information was collected. And I, for the life of me, cannot come up with any reason why whatever benefit might be gleaned from supposedly fooling the Russians would exposing that kind of source or capability. So the other thing is, we in the understand is our human capability is terrible. It has really been seriously degraded over time, and increased reliance on what the intelligence folks call liaison reporting. That means that if Scott was an intelligence officer and I was working for the CIA still, I'd go to Scott. Scott would give me information, and then I'd write up an intelligence report based upon what Scott Ritter told me, the Polish intelligence officer. That is liaison reporting. Well, that's a far different thing than if I have a source that's directly in the general staff of the Russian military, or that's in the office of the president of Vladimir Putin. Kind of direct information that we rarely get. And many times the United States intelligence community is being told that Indians will say, "Oh, trust us, we got somebody on the inside." They're far out stories. In contrast, the Russians have extraordinary human capability. They have not working against a language barrier. Because even many of the Ukrainians who are espousing the need to speak Ukrainian don't speak Ukrainian. As I think you've noted as well, that Zelensky has a terrible, he's very poor with his Ukrainian, he's real good with his Russian. And plus, a lot of these people served previously into the served in some of the same military units. So just the human standpoint of recruiting somebody is far easier for the Russians, as well as then throughout penetrating NATO. So I think the United States and NATO are at a disadvantage on the human intelligence front vis-a-vis the Russians. And the intelligence dynamic game, as you know, what may be true last week may not be true this week, and it constantly has to be updated. This is not like a religious confession. Stick with it.
Well, and this is an important point, Larry, because these documents give us, as you said rightly so, a snapshot in time. They give us a picture, whether it's accurate or inaccurate, a picture from a point in time. But there's something about these documents that is timeless. And to me, that's the most important aspect of these documents, and the one that nobody's really focused on. But you did, you brought it up. You can reverse engineer all those fancy words at the top of the document that are linked to a paragraph, and you can find out how we collected information. And that, to me, is the greatest damage that has been done here. Not that we gave away what some analyst was thinking back in February, because as you point out, that's no longer valid today. Too much has happened. The world has moved on. But the collection methods, sources and methods that were used to collect that information are still being used today. And
right.
just me reviewing these documents, I think I can pull out what information came from what. And if I can do that, the Russians can do that. So I think these documents actually hurt our intelligence community tremendously. I don't know if give you an example. It's one I can say in public because I had nothing to do with it. But my understanding is that right after 9/11 or sometime, we put a multi-billion-dollar satellite into orbit that was specifically built to collect on a satellite phone being used by Osama bin Laden. And that then Aviation Week and Space Technology ran an article that made reference to this, and the satellite phone went off. And therefore, we had a multi-billion-dollar piece of junk in space now because it was purpose-built. I'm not saying we have purpose-built things, but I am saying that we might have multi-billion-dollar pieces of junk in space that have been compromised because of the leak of this information. And to me, that is I'm all out. Believe me, I love Julian Assange. I love him as a publisher. I love what he's put out there. I think it's been awesome. I think Edward Snowden did a fantastic job on exposing constitutional violations. But I'm also an American who believes that we have to have an intelligence community capable of collecting information in a timely fashion so we can inform our decision makers so they can make sound policy judgments. And I think these documents really hurt the security of the United States of America.
No, I don't disagree with that. They're very damaging. What catches my attention is sort of the timing of the release of these documents. We can go with the story as presented in the Washington Post and later in the New York Times that, this was just the result of some incredible sleuthing by Bellingcat. And then Bellingcat alerted both the Washington Post and the New York Times, and man, they jumped on board to launch an investigation that the FBI hadn't even figured out what the gaming board chat room was. Okay, you can go with that. I don't buy it. I think it's nonsense because then you have to look at the other context. These messages were not randomly chosen. What I mean by randomly is if you're an analyst, if you're this kid, and you're just trying to pull down material to say, hey guys, look at all the top secret stuff I can get access to. Why is it then your selection is almost entirely Ukraine and Russia? When there's lots of other intelligence that was available in those documents that was not taken. And it coincides, coming out on Good Friday for the Western Christian calendar. Just slightly unusual, and then how quickly things just unfolded after that. I take a look at what has transpired since, say, March 4th and the coming out of those documents. Well, one thing that's happened is the CIA policy in the Middle East is in complete shambles. It has fallen apart because of Putin and Xi Jinping having a summit in Moscow, agreeing to cooperate on all fronts, including military, diplomatic, economic. And then in the aftermath of that, China leading the way and brokering peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And as a result of that, the war in Yemen is coming to a close. That war in Yemen was financed, directed, supplied by the CIA. It was part of a U.S. government policy to weaken Iran. Similarly, in Syria, the United States with the United Kingdom worked closely with the Turks initially, with Saudi support to try to rid Syria of Bashar al-Assad, starting back in 2012. And that has led to a bloody civil war. And again, the effort to get rid of Assad was directed at Iran. Well, now what's happened? The Saudis are saying, no. We're inviting Bashar Assad and his government back into the Arab League. We're reestablishing diplomatic relationships. We're not going to be funding anything about that war anymore. Turkey is looking at a rapprochement with Syria's Assad as a result of Russia's intervention. Now, step back. If you're a CIA ops officer and you run the Special Activities Division, everything you've been working for and your promotions are contingent on, it's going up in smoke, baby. I mean, it's crumbling. Would you be a little upset? And who do you blame for that? Well, part of what you blame is the Biden administration, Victoria Nuland, Antony Blinken. So if you could engineer a leak that's going to embarrass them, make them look bad, as well as expose the fact that Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley, they've either been lying or they just haven't been reading the briefs. There's no other option there. And is that a possibility? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. Others have raised a different scenario, that this is intended to create, if you will, a casus belli against the people of America so that they can shut down TikTok and shut down bloggers like me and like you so that we can't go online and disrupt U.S. policy. That's also a possibility. I personally believe that this was a leak designed to embarrass the Biden administration, and that there, as Cy Hirsch has reported in his piece recently, there's some real unrest in senior ranks within both the military and the intelligence community. I think that as a background helps explain part of what's going on.
Well, thank you. Look, this is just mind blowing. I mean, the fact that classified information is being treated in such a cavalier fashion for whatever reason is it bothers me tremendously.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
We live in interesting times. There's that old Chinese curse, and may you live in interesting times, and we've been cursed. So there we are. Speaking of China, we just had, I think it might even still be ongoing, the Chinese defense minister has visited Moscow, and there's been a lot of speculation about what's going on between China and Russia militarily, and the big speculation here in the United States is that, of course, Russia is so bad at fighting wars and so bad at producing weapons that they have no choice but to turn to China to make up for their shortcomings. I think there might be another take on it. I think you might have another take on it. I was wondering what you thought of the Chinese defense minister's visit to Moscow.
Well, first, if you haven't seen the video of the first meeting between the defense minister and Putin, as they approach each other, Putin's reaching out his hand to shake. Chinese general snaps to attention, salutes him, then shakes his hand, and it's a warm handshake. I thought, wow. I mean, it was classy. Chinese guy didn't have to do that, but he did it as a show of respect to Putin. The notion, and I know this drives you crazy as well, the notion that Russia is some a bunch of hillbillies, barely, they could barely make a wood wash tub, is Russia, probably of all countries in the world, including China, has the most robust defense industry capability to produce weapon systems, artillery shells, ammunition, planes, rockets, etc. They don't need anything from China. China needs. Russia has proven hypersonic missiles. And hypersonic missiles, at least 3 varieties, used to defeat maritime threats, such as a carrier battle group steaming towards Taiwan. Does not have a reliable, proven, battle-tested hypersonic missile. So, which way do you go? Do you go with the unproven or the proven? Well, you go with the proven. And I think that's one of the things that's being actively discussed. Putin and the defense minister was discussed between Putin and Xi Jinping, because people need to appreciate we're seeing something that is unprecedented in history with respect to Russia and China. Never have they come together to collaborate across the entire spectrum of economic, political, diplomatic issues. They are now. In fact, it was the entire premise, one of the underlying premises of U.S. foreign policy over the last 70 years, to keep them separate. The United States loved playing the role of Conrad Dobler, that old NFL football player who was notorious. Hey, did you hear about your sister? And people would start fighting. Well, we did our best to keep the Chinese and Russians and others. We did our best to keep them separate. And when Nixon went to China in 1972, in February, he made the point that, we're going to recognize the one China policy, which means that we recognize it is part of China. It is a province of China. In the same way that Hawaii is a state of the States. And now that's all reversing as far as the U.S. is concerned, and yet Russia and China are now working together in tandem. So I think this is not just a change. This is, as I've talked about before, a game changer. Brother, I think this is a game changer. I mean, it's a whole new game, a whole new world.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, because our Conrad Dobler tendencies. That's, again, for the audience, that's a reference to American football and a football player who's notorious about creating problems on the field. It's not something that's part of history. It's happening now. We saw in June of 2021, Joe Biden tried to put a wedge between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping in a reference he made after their meeting in Geneva. And then just recently, Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, has said that Russia should be afraid of being swallowed by China. Again, the idea to plant in the minds of people that there's nefarious intent on the part of China and that Russia should not be linking up. So, they are doing the Conrad Dobler thing still. But let's get back to defense industry for a second, and maybe we'll leave it with this. A Wall Street Journal reporter was recently arrested by the Russians in Ekaterinburg. Evan Gerashkov. I could be butchering his name, and I apologize to his family if I did so. And the city of Ekaterinburg, there is a defense industry. There's a lot of defense industry, but one in particular produces caliber missiles, which are missiles used by the Russians to great effect in the war on Ukraine. And there's been a lot of speculation that Russia's running out of missiles, and that this could have an impact on Russia's ability to win this conflict. And so it would appear that information about the ability of this facility to increase production capacity would be of great interest to the United States. Also, I would imagine that a reporter knows not to receive this kind of information, that the quickest way to be arrested and go to jail is to act like a spy, and receiving classified information is a spy-like activity, something that Nicholas Danilov learned the hard way in 1986 when he met with the CIA chief of station, Murat Naturbov. He met with case officers. He helped them craft mechanisms to make contact with somebody for the purpose of gaining classified information. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, sometimes it's a duck. I think that Evan, at a minimum, crossed the boundary. But we also know since 1996 that the CIA has admitted that it uses journalist cover for its officers in areas of particular difficulty, and Russia would be such an area. To think that a CIA case officer gets assigned under diplomatic cover to Moscow without the Russians knowing exactly who he is not believable. I think the Russians know exactly every single case officer sent to the embassy. Right. And so this would be one of these cases where the CIA might want to go out and recruit somebody who's outside of the embassy who might escape notice. This is why journalists have always been against this. They said, if the CIA uses a journalist as a cover, you've destroyed the credibility of all journalists, because every nation will have every right to view every American journalist as a potential CIA agent. But what are your thoughts about this, about a couple things? The CIA using journalistic cover, and do you think that Evan was a journalist under CIA cover, or do you think he's totally innocent and et cetera?
Well, I don't necessarily think he's innocent, but I checked with one of my buddies, retired CIA chief of station. Last posting was in The Hague. And, he said there are some real obstacles that basically he described it as it's illegal. He says you'd have to go through an enormous approval process just to use a U.S. journalist. But then he made the point also, he says, but from a tradecraft standpoint, it's stupid. If you're in a high threat environment, that guy's already walking around with a target on his back. Why in the world would you take that kind of risk? Use a foreigner, recruit a foreigner from some other country that might actually have, a reporter for the India Times. That would be a great opportunity. You might be able to get away with that. So there's a lot, I think, about this story that we don't know. As you read Gershkovitz's reporting, boy, it's terrible. I mean, he was basically a tool. I mean, he was not what I would call a grounded journalist. He was more like what's the propaganda spin message that I have to put out today, and so he would do that. And I could see naturally from the Russian standpoint, they say, oh, this guy's got to be a spy. He can't be that stupid. Well, I never underestimate the power of being stupid. Okay, there is always that risk. But notice the difference. That Gershkovitz been picked up. Oh, the Western media. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, he was. It's okay for him to try to get that information. However, with respect to our boy Jack Teixeira, hey, this guy shouldn't be doing that. We, the media, have to clamp down on this, even though we've been looking at classified information. I mean, just the hypocrisy of it, the contradictions inherent. I've always been a firm believer that we need a press that can get access to classified information by whistleblowers and publish it, on the understanding that as a whistleblower, you are taking upon yourself the risk. Yes, you're breaking the law. You're going to face the potential of being punished, but you have a good reason that you want to get the information out there because the public needs to know, as was the case with the Pentagon Papers, and as others have tried. But don't have it harbor any illusions that being a whistleblower is going to result in you getting a parade and being carried around on people's shoulders. If the information you're really bringing out is damaging to the status quo, you're going to be mercilessly attacked. Not that you would know anything about that.
No, I've never. Not me. No, but yeah, I mean, look, one of my heroes is Dan Ellsberg, and I consider him not just a mentor, but a colleague and a friend. And unfortunately, in case the audience doesn't know, Dan Ellsberg has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he's literally on his deathbed. But the thing, one of the great lessons in life that Dan Ellsberg gave was something that happened before I knew him. But I've seen the film clip and I watch it often because it's such an important lesson, and it goes to exactly what you've talked about. He's going up the steps of the court. He's facing trial for treason for leaking the Pentagon Papers, which were documents that exposed the lies of the American government in Vietnam. And someone said, "Aren't you worried about going to jail?" And he said, "Wouldn't you go to jail if you could stop a war?" And if you think about the courage and the integrity, the honor behind that statement, and it's exactly right. If you're going to be a whistleblower and do it in the right cause, understand that you could go to jail. You could lose everything. But then it's like asking a Marine or a soldier or a sailor to give their life for their country. It's the equivalent of throwing yourself on that hand grenade or doing some heroic act in combat. To be willing to pay the price for exposing lies to make your country a better place, to make your country live up to the aspirations it claims to me, it's the height of heroism. And Daniel Ellsberg is a national hero, and he's an international hero. And I just hope that people remember him fondly, remember him well, remember the precedent that he set. And Larry, I count you in that company as well. Brave people who step out there, do the right thing. look, this is a conversation that we're going to be able to have over and over again. I thank you very much for coming on today and giving us your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Johnson, a veteran intelligence officer, thank you very much. And, I think we just need to reflect on the conversation that we just had in the things that Larry has, helped bring to light here. We live in difficult times, and there are people who are desperate for information. We're desperate to empower ourselves with this information. But it's imperative that we ensure that we do the due diligence, the quality control, and we understand why the information is being made available, how it's being made available. And this entire escapade regarding the leaking of information to the press that has recently taken place puts all of this on display. And we're going to be wrestling with this issue going forward. But I think today we had a very useful discussion about this. And again, I thank Larry for coming on. I thank you guys for watching. Remember, knowledge is power.